Alright guys, we are going to be starting part 2 of the 6mm Creedmoor reloading video with a little bit of voltage Mountain Dew. And the first step in the process today, to continue the process I should say, is going to be priming the brass. So what we're going to add to the press here is the primer holder, and then we need to make sure that we have the right size primer bar in the ram. That way we don't get that mixed up. What you do is you place the piece of brass in the shell holder and run the ram up, and then you'll just press down one primer into that little primer holder, and as you run the ram all the way down, that little primer holder in the ram will help seat the primer. So you just run your finger along the bottom of it, make sure that it's set to the right depth. I don't actually check primer depth because I'm not too worried about it. I just make sure that it's not sitting outside of the piece of brass or anything like that. I'm using Hodgkin 4350. It seems to be working pretty well so far, so we're going to stick with that. We're going to throw some of that into our powder container there. Next, we need to set up our safety powder scale so that we get the right charge weight for the loads that we're developing right now. So here, what I'm doing is making sure that, first of all, that the scale itself is zeroed out, and it looks pretty good there. So what I'll do, once I find out exactly where that's zeroed at, is we can go and we can set it to the charge weight, which is going to be 44 grains of 4350. So what you do is you move the little ball to 40, that'll give us 40 grains, and then you move it to, on the little slider itself, to 4 grains, and then 0.1 of a grain. So that will give us our 44.0 grain charge weight. What I like to do, once I get the thimble set up, is to just run it through a couple times, make sure that it gets a consistent amount of powder in there before I check it. And then we'll do a little bit of fine detailing on the thimble itself so that I get exactly as close to possible as I can, not exactly, 44.0 grains of 4350. And it's pretty consistent, it's pretty close. Once we've got our thimble all set up to give us the right charge at 44 grains, then we'll actually go ahead and start charging the primed pieces of brass. And what I'll do is I'll grab the piece of brass with the primer already in it and everything ready to go, run it right up to the end of our powder charger, run it down. I like to flick a little bit just to make sure that all the little grains of powder get in there nice and well. And then we'll just keep going until we get all of our pieces of brass filled with the correct charge of powder. And every once in a while we'll just go back through and check every 3 to 5, 10 rounds, every 3 to 5, 10 pieces of brass. Once we have all of our brass primed and charged, we'll grab our bullet seating die, run the ram up in the press, and then we'll bring our die down until it's touching the top of it, the top of the ram. I like to back it off just a little bit, run our lock ring down so the die doesn't move, and then we'll back out our seating die, and then we'll grab our dummy cartridge that has our cartridge overall length for my rifle, and we'll show you here that measurement is going to be 2.815 inches. So we're going to try to keep it as close to that as possible. That way all of our loads are consistent. So I don't know if you can really see here. There it goes. 2.851. is going to be our overall length. So we'll run our mock cartridge down, and then we'll run the end of the seating die just enough to where it barely touches the tip of the bullet. We'll back it off just a little bit. That'll give us a little bit of play. I'm using Nosler RDF 105 grain bullets. I like them. They work pretty well. So what we are going to do here is we're going to grab our primed charged piece of brass, and we are going to set it into the shell holder and the ram of the press itself, and then we'll place a bullet in the mouth of the brass. We'll run it up through the die, and once we do that, we're going to just check and see what the overall length of that cartridge is. What I do when I do this is I run the ram multiple times and I spin the brass inside the shell holder. And what that does is it'll make sure that the bullet is set more evenly within the mouth of the case. These bullets are set out pretty far outside of the case mouth. So you just want to try to make sure that they stay as level as possible within the case mouth. Then we'll just keep playing around with the depth of the bullet seating die to make sure that we can get it as close to that overall length that I mentioned before as possible. And then we'll try to keep it there as consistent as possible. I'm a fan of the Lee factory crimp die. I like how consistent you can get your crimps on the end of the case mouth. So when we go to install the factory crimp die into the press, we'll put our dummy cartridge of the overall length and run it up through the ram. And then we'll bring down the die just until it's at about the perfect depth for it to not over crimp, because if you over crimp it'll squish the bullets themselves, and we really want to try to avoid that. So we'll get it so that it's just barely crimps in the very end of the case mouth. What I like to do as well when crimping is to spin it just a touch, make sure that it gets a nice even crimp all the way around the end of the brass, as you can see there. So there you have it, guys. That's the end of my 6mm Creedmoor reloading videos. You can take it from a piece of fired brass. You can deprime it, full length size it, prime it, charge it, seat a bullet, crimp it, make sure it's all consistent, and that's what you get. So thanks for watching. Gotta love the Voltage Mountain Dew to keep me going during these videos. Thanks, guys.